I'm Amy Sky, and today I'm going to share with you one of my very favorite Canadian books called Fugitive Pieces by Anne Michaels. The reason I'm so taken with the book is obviously Anne's medium is the written word, but she's a painter with words, and she renders her story through a series of still lifes that are so suffused with psychological truth that we grow to understand the characters on a very profound and moving level. And I'd like to start by reading an excerpt from the beginning of the book. We're in Poland. It's the beginning of the Second World War, and our narrator is a 6-year-old boy named Jacob. My sister had long outgrown the hiding place. Bella was 15, and even I admitted she was beautiful, with heavy brows and magnificent hair like black syrup, thick and luxurious, a muscle down her back. A work of art, our mother said, brushing it for her while Bella sat in a chair. I was still small enough to vanish behind the wallpaper in the cupboard, cramming my head sideways between choking plaster and beams, eyelashes scraping. Since those minutes inside the wall, I've imagined the dead lose every sense except hearing.
Fugitive Pieces is the first novel by poet Anne Michaels about Jacob Beer, another poet who as a child lost everything, and at a later point in his life is putting together his identity and trying to make sense of what that meant.
It's extraordinary enough to have a writer who writes so poetically in the novel form. These are very small passages. They're pieces, fugitive pieces. They're quite small passages that construct this whole novel. And the language is extremely lush. It's filled with imagery. It's beautiful, beautifully constructed. And I think that not only is that narrative itself quite different from the way a lot of other writers write and Canadian writers write, but also for the subject matter. How can you make the language so beautiful? How can you make the imagery so stunning and memorable and resonant?
One of the unique things about experiencing this book is that because Anne Michaels is a poet, you can read the book in a linear way from cover to cover, or you can sort of dip into it like you would dip into a treasure bag, and every time you open a page you can find something beautiful that in just a few short sentences illuminates an experience or an emotion that you can't believe someone has found such gorgeous words to describe.
The writing is so poetic, so powerful, that you find yourself pausing in the middle of a line or in the middle of a paragraph just to reread it, because it's such a beautiful way to put things. And at the same time, you really want to know what happened next. So you're fighting yourself through the story almost, as you're trying to say, oh wait, I want to absorb that. At the same time, you want to turn the page and get on to what happens next.
The burst door, wood ripped from hinges, cracking like ice under the shouts. Noises never heard before, torn from my father's mouth. Then silence. My mother had been sewing a button on my shirt. She kept her buttons in a chipped saucer. I heard the rim of the saucer in circles on the floor. I heard the spray of buttons, little white teeth. Blackness filled me, spread from the back of my head into my eyes as if my brain had been punctured. Spread from stomach to legs. I gulped and gulped, swallowing it whole. The wall filled with smoke. I struggled out and stared while the air caught fire. I wanted to go to my parents, to touch them, but I couldn't unless I stepped on their blood. The soul leaves the body instantly, as if it can hardly wait to be free. My mother's face was not her own. My father was twisted with falling, two shapes in the flesh heap. The reason I'm so taken with the book is obviously Anne's medium is the written word, but she's a painter with words, and she renders her story through a series of still lifes that are so suffused with psychological truth that we grow to understand the characters on a very profound and moving level.
The thing about Fugitive Pieces is that it's a very, very dense book, very hard to read initially. I started reading it at lunchtime as I would poetry, in small doses, a few pages at a time. And then it opened up, it was like watching a flower in those films where they show a flower opening up in stop action. And the whole novel opened up for me in that way, and I'm glad it did. I fell profoundly into this book because I was reading it as it must be read, slowly, carefully, and reflecting, giving myself time to reflect between the pages.
At this point in the book, Jacob has been hiding himself resourcefully in the forest, but he's now a young boy at the end of his physical and emotional rope. And at that moment, he meets Athos, a man who will change his life. The man excavating in the mud at Biskupin, the man I came to know as Athos, wore me under his clothes. My limbs bone shadows on his strong legs and arms, my head buried in his neck, both of us beneath a heavy coat. I was suffocating, but I couldn't get warm. Inside Athos's coat, the cold air streaming in from the edge of the car door, the drone of engine and wheels, once in a while the sound of a passing lorry. In our strange coupling, Athos's voice burrowed into my brain. I didn't understand, so I made it up myself. It's right. It's necessary to run. For miles through darkness in the back seat of the car, I had no idea where we were or where we were going. Another man drove, and when we were signaled to stop, Athos pulled a blanket over us. In Greek-stained but competent German, Athos complained that he was ill. He didn't just complain, he whimpered, he moaned, he insisted on describing his symptoms and treatments in detail until, disgusted and annoyed, they waved us on. Each time we stopped, I was numb against his solid body, a blister tight with fear. My head ached with fever, I smelled my hair burning. Through days and nights, I sped from my father and my mother, from long afternoons with my best friend Monas by the river. They were yanked right through my scalp. But Bella clung. We were Russian dolls, I inside Athos, Bella inside me. I don't know how long we traveled this way. Once I woke and saw signs in a fluid script that from a distance looked like Hebrew. Then Athos said, we were home. In Greece. When we got closer, I saw the words were strange. I'd never seen Greek letters before. It was night, but the square houses were white even in the darkness, and the air was soft. I was dim with hunger, and from lying so long in the car. Athos said, I will be your Kumbaros, your godfather, the marriage sponsor for you and your sons. Athos said, we must carry each other. If we don't have this, what are we? On the island of Zakynthos, Athos, scientist, scholar, middling master of languages, performed his most astounding feat. From out of his trousers, he plucked the 7-year-old refugee, Jacob Beer.